I imagine in this situation, we don't have a lot of feedback. It's just me talking. It's not like there are other people going to chime in or something, right?
Yes, we have to give them the access, and it's better when we create a like a space for participation.
Sure. So are we still waiting to have that go live then, or should I proceed?
I am gonna start recording. I was setting my OBS, and now we are recording and we can start. We are live.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Um, oh, there's some people I recognize here. Welcome Bianca and Zepti. So today we're actually going to go through and talk about the trust creation, decolonization, and sort of the overview of what we do and you know how we go about doing it. So it seems like a very broad thing that I'll be covering today. So let me just so this is the thing that you're seeing on the screen. Besides me is the presentation that I have where it talks about how to take responsibility inside of um, sort of life and also just in social situations and other things. Um, so definitely, what I'll do is I'll talk for a few minutes. How long do we have for this? Is it an hour or 30
Yes,
minutes or?
it's an hour.
Okay, great. So yeah, so as part of Gravity, then I'm gonna bring up some other graphics besides this, just kind of talk about the different ways that we approach, how the gravity thing is done. So let me just bring that up for you here. Okay, so gravity is based on two fundamental principles. The idea is that what we've observed in dealing with crypto communities and intentional communities. Crypto communities are basically intentional communities that are more or less non-local and digital. Um, so in this idea of trying to create like a radical inclusion where we can have everybody inside of it, we have to recognize fundamentally at the top here that all of this is very complex. So that is the contextualizing principle that we have to begin with. And in so doing, we have to also recognize that the aim that we're going for here, and this is kind of a complicated graphic, but it's got many layers to it. But the fundamental aspects that we're going for here is to work on a trust creation engine. And what this is kind of what you're looking at when you see this. So what we do basically is try to, inside of complexity, aim for this sort of light-sided thing here is for trust creation. And the whole idea is that people who work on a continuous improvement process, continuous improvement is not just a software development process, it's actually uh, a continuous circular thing. If you go all the way around the outside of this, we have to start and assume that there are a lot of developmental ways that you can approach things. I use, many myself, including some of the ones you're reading here. And generally, people are going to also be centered on particular emotional change agents for their particular organization or DAO or intentional community. And then when you start to gather together, the thing that's often been lost in sort of non-crypto communities or in the capitalist approaches to things is to include the commons. So our group is born out of the token engineering commons, which is born out of the common stack. And so the commons and Ostrom's principles are very much part of the DNA of our aspect of things. So instead of thinking about it as just this kind of duality, I wanted to point out that there is, where inevitably, like people say, inevitably conflict happens, and so you have to kind of manage it. But there are other aspects to that that a lot of people, are not aware of or don't think of proactively. And it's also been our direct experience that if you don't do that and you don't see the whole of how it all works, then you'll often fall prey to some other kinds of issues. So so we try to get ahead of that and talk to people and be in such a way that they can see the larger picture. So in any case, Ostrom's principles are designed to solve some of the um, issues that you'll run into when you try to get together as a group. So things like the prisoner's dilemma or the tragedy of the commons. And so by working on Ostrom's principles, then certainly you can certainly avoid that. And Eleanor Ostrom, she actually won um, Nobel Prize for her work. And I will point out that Ostrom's 8 design principles here, um, these things actually really help, and hopefully you guys can see just from what I'm putting on the screen that defining clear group boundaries and roles and other things, matching rules governing the use of common goods, then you basically end up with less conflicts as a result. Ensure that those affected by the rules can participate in modifying the rules. So things like you can see in the United States today where gerrymandering and things are happening. You know, if you design in a good foundational way of dealing with conflict and understand and appreciate the complexities of how it all works, then you can use all these 8 principles to hopefully avoid problems. So, and instead of ending up having to sort of manage um, conflict after the fact, you can get into what I like to think of as this thing, which is a trust creation engine. So essentially, what you're doing is, as you get together, you're doing all the planning and all the things. Understand that this is a complex system, but then at some point you're going to run into the emergent shadow that of assumptions and other things that we're all carrying with us from the colonized system, from the capitalist system, from trauma, from family, from other things, and we need ways of ritualizing that. So it is our express purpose to assist groups of people in ritualizing conflict using things like liberating structures and trauma informed practices, and we participate as educational change agents inside of that kind of system to guide and work with both the trust creation and the conflict management side of the picture. I've also got another graphic here that kind of talks about the iterative process and the evolutionary process for working on that we generally use for um, things like when you have complex systems, a lot of times you need ways in which to break down how those conflicts came about, or what the structural problems are, within that. So we have a lot of this kind of, um, wisdom to try to allow for people to be able to talk. And this is actually what Rule Omega is kind of about. And I'm encouraging you guys to look up Rule Omega on YouTube. There's a really excellent video about why this works. And the whole idea here is that the intention is to allow, it's basically a space creation rule where you can allow for the discovery of some kind of signal inside of all of this noise. So it could be that I just don't understand what you're saying, or because I'm, for example, on the autism spectrum, I might just have missed some crucial piece of information because I was overwhelmed by, my sensory input or whatever. And so, parallel with rule omega is this principle of nonviolent communication. So we can, there's an entire architecture of that Marshall Rosenberg put in place, and then also hopefully we can then start to use technical change agents to fix the underlying structure that will then transform conflict and allow us to discover some of the things that we forgot, some emerging principles that will actually allow us to learn from the mistakes and add to the complexity with which we regard our cultural participation in particular groups. So this is kind of the high level of where we come from when we're dealing with communities, and there are a lot of tools and other things to deal with things, particularly along the axis of where where some blind spot that we've had in the process of creating trust has inevitably led us to have to deal with conflict. And if you are constantly saying I have a continuous improvement idea for the culture, it can become an advantage. If you're continuously including the comments, then that also can become if you're continuously allowing for people to uh, have enough space to be able to get the signal out of all the noise they're hearing and transforming conflict, these four aspects can be very transformative in terms of how to go about, you know, dealing with conflict and creating trust. So, So to that end, I have basically a presentation that I've given multiple times. If you look up Durgadas and the Token Engineering Commons on YouTube, you'll see kind of the evolution of how this works, and I'm going to talk to you about it again today. Um, there is This is me. I've lived in an ashram for about 5 years, and I started a yoga studio here in Nanaimo, BC, in Canada. Um, I was a monk in a Hindu ashram for about 5 years. It's also true that I talk about my positionality a little bit. I am also going to skip over this just for a little bit, but the ideas that I'm fundamentally using the privilege that I have to kind of subvert my own privilege and to use it as a positive force. There are in terms of the yoga and non-dual Vedantic spiritual tradition that I come from, there are really only two ways to think. And there are a couple of links in here that talk about Joe Bolta Taylor's stroke of insight, and Ian McGilchrist talks about his book, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World, which I have not read yet, but I've read certain other things, and I'm hoping that the same people that publish his books will publish the ones I'm making. But in any case, they're really just the divided and the unified ways of approaching things. And the way the culture teaches us in our schooling and everything else is all very colonized. And it's also, you could pretty much see that almost everything that we're taught is very much on the divided end of things. Um, in fact, we've actually pushed the unified way of thinking into the psychological shadow, so we almost fear it. Uh, all kinds of things that would divide us are prominent in our culture and common, but the things that are unified are actually becoming more common now, but certainly have a lot of structural barriers to overcome to be able to get into. So I'd like to talk to you about undoing a lot of those things now, and and then what can we actually do about all of this. So generally speaking, if you have two different ways to think, you're going to see these two different kinds of social forms, right? So you'll see these divided social forms where there's a kind of assumption of epistemic violence, where the assumption of materialism and the sort of dogmas of our culture are dominating. And not only that, if you think somehow differently about those things, then you're fundamentally, um, you know, it's okay to be violent to you according to this culture. So I kind of compare and contrast how we've got these pre-colonization worldviews, and even though it's not like there wasn't, divided ways of thinking pre-colonization, it's just been kind of industrialized, and particularly with the internet, that's even more that way. So from the viewpoint of gravity, we basically come at the cryptocurrency space as a social justice movement. It's primarily designed to extract us from the divided worldview that is the way that we approach money, and you can actually see all of these. All of these divided things, some of which include, the monetary, for example, the way that we assess what value is. And we use certain kinds of objectified and technical languages to justify and rationalize those things. And we basically create these kinds of hierarchies by default, and everything that we do actually makes those hierarchies more um, rigid, and actually even things that are not within those hierarchies, we've devised methodologies for making it so that um, people inevitably end up with a kind of idealistic idea. And a lot of DAOs are actually founded on these, and intentional communities are founded on these idealistic ideas about what's going on. um, but it's been my experience that with these things, that often we don't necessarily know or have the context or have the tools to be able to, properly connect all of these things together and make it understood how we're supposed to get beyond all of that. There's another graphic I'm going to bring up here. uh, just 1 second. Do we have any questions up to this point? Can I open it up to questions now? Can somebody help me with the answering of that on this platform, please?
Whoever wants to speak can raise their hand. But I also wanted to complement that this idea of unified thinking is also very important while trying to solve a conflict, because when you separate or you divide you versus me, um, we are creating a barrier and we are creating an enemy, and then we will not be able to cooperate with our enemy. But when we see a conflict from a unified point of view, we can understand that the other person is involved in the conflict as we are, and that that person um, can be our strategic ally to look for transformative solutions.
Hmm. And also, as you can see with this graphic here, that was produced by the Omega Group in the Token Engineering Commons. This is actually a way that you could say that the divided and the unified are combined together in this kind of new form that we're all trying to create, as a parallel system to the older, extractive and abusive systems that we've been living under all this time. So, combining all these things together hopefully provides a bit of a roadmap for how, we can work together in terms of specifically crypto economics to make this, you know, a better uh, place to live in. And so there is, Right. So then on the back of that, what I've observed is that inside of DAOs, basically we have this kind of evolution from the modern to the postmodern, and now with we have an opportunity as a group in the DAO space to transcend the kind of circular trap that you can see here. Typically, what people are doing is like, hey, I'm in this, terrible, centralized, abusive, extractive culture and economy that automatically creates all of these things. And we all know what that's about. But then we're like, yeah, there's certain things that we as a DAO might think of that is tending to be things that we need to work on, but most people actually skip completely over that and jump right to this. So they move out of the dystopia, and in their need to escape all of that, they jump over entirely, or at least majorly, over the need to do all of these really foundational things, creating structures differently and becoming different ourselves so that we can recognize the fundamental changes that need to happen. But oftentimes we end up in many DAOs that we've seen and during our experience in dealing with conflicts is that there's often this very idealistic utopia, which is potentially going to fail, leading you then back to this dystopia because you weren't aware that you actually needed to go down to the core of the issue and deal with all of these things, um, you know, from a systemic thing. If you can do that, then the gravity of that sort of restricts you can actually become a gravitational thing that pushes you out and puts you into a kind of a protopic model, um, which is the actual practical wing or the manifest, uh, practicable, pedagogical model for deliberately developing help for everybody who's participating in the system, and allows for complexities and allows for the participation of each and every person, and can escape the first tier thinking that often traps us into thinking that everybody else in the different developmental colors is a little bit crazy, and then it allows for the culture to develop in its participants, what the culture eventually becomes. And so this is an awful lot of information here. I'll provide as many links to this stuff as I can after the fact, but I just wanted to show you that we spent a long time developing roadmaps for people to solve some of the intrinsic structural issues that we've observed over time, and using a combination of modern thinking and ancient wisdom. So that's kind of addresses the social forms part of this, and but the other part is just the final part that I'm kind of talking about is this trauma informed aspect. That's part of my talk today, and basically this is um, because we live in an extract and an abusive culture, we there tend to be really only two polarities that can exist here. One is you can be the abuser and have power, or you can be the abused and don't have any power at all. And it seems to me that there needs to be a third alternative in that, where we can actually live according to the principles of this middle thing, as a way to recover from this is all the trauma informed stuff that we have to get into in order to get the kind of escape velocity to get out of this dystopic utopic trap, right? And it just cycles around endlessly of even if you have revolutions, people end up with this utopic idea, and then later on it's kind of subverted by dystopic elements. So what I'm promoting and talking about with respect to the overall large scale contextualizing approach that we're trying to take to this. And that's the thing, right? Colonization is a fundamentally decontextualizing activity, right? And so, in order to decolonize, you actually need to contextualize things. And so, that's why I spend a lot of time, and Juan and I spend an awful lot of time together talking about how we can, make it easier for people to understand some of these very complex evolutionary steps. So yeah, so I have about 60 pages in this, but I'll skip over some of these things. But basically, there are these fundamental philosophical, perceptual, and epistemic experiences that people are having across, um, you know, fundamentally divided cultures versus unified cultures. So the focus on being right, for example, because you know you'll be punished if you're not adhering to the way in which things are taught and thought about in this divided methodology. In But in fact, there's another alternative for all of that, to think in terms of the unified frameworks, and to validate and contextualize your intellectual activity as a kind of balance between openness and discrimination. And so, having to cycle between those things, if you can do it competently and do it as a community where you're encouraging each other to do that, then it gives you a better chance at um, creating a kind of virtuous cycle where you end up with more trust creation, as opposed to situations where you didn't think about that stuff, or you didn't bother to put in place a way of ritualizing conflict, making conflict normal, and developing shared language between the participants, so that when conflicts do arise, you have ways to be able to uh, bring those things forward and talk about them in a way that everyone can recognize. And so, yeah, so even within our socialization systems, we have, these kinds of structures too, where in the divided socialization system, everyone joins in a gang, so we can all feel safe, and to some degree, even our escapist DAO utopias are thought about in the safety in numbers of people who think like me. That's certainly not the healthiest way to look at things, and we have to be able to allow for a kind of radically inclusive thing, but that uses process-oriented methodologies as opposed to just people ganging up together. Um, so, talking about colonization, this is actually taken from an excellent course that I took that was related to yoga and decolonization. And so you'll see some of the yoga context. I'm talking to you from my yoga studio. I teach in yoga in a decolonized way. And my partner who helped me do this is um, of Indian descent. So it's important to both of us to be able to understand and be able to teach about what colonization is, what decolonization is, and it can be called the dark side of Western modernity. So when there is Western progress, there is also this kind of, these domination hierarchies that existed. Um, and as I talked about before, it's economic and political, and settler colonialism is often what people think of when they think of the term colonization, but that's really just, like we took a bunch of people from our country and squatted on your land until we thought it was ours. That's settler colonization. But there are a whole bunch of other terms that are useful to understand about how this works. And there's an entire shared language that you know we've developed, and I'm furthering the development of, with the book that I'm writing based on this material here, and the practice of teaching it and talking about it on a regular basis with DAOs and other intentional communities in real life. So the next thing is Yeah, it's my fundamental assertion that colonization is a worldwide financial and governance level expression of narcissistic abuse. The great thing about that is it's very diagnostically accurate, and there's a lot of links that you can see on here that I've got through. But if you actually, look up, um, you know, on Reddit, for example, they have raised by narcissists. You can there's a lot of recovering from narcissistic abuse YouTube videos, and a lot of people like Dr. Ramani who talk about dealing with narcissists in your life. Narcissism is the big sort of watchword of sort of the authoritarian era that we're all going through. So it seems to me that we should probably be able to identify that divided way of thinking that inevitably results in narcissism, and you can see that if you have your entire way of thinking is all completely blind to unified ways of thinking, and it's all thinking about the reflexive divisions and divide and rule by which we are often, and there's even with online communities, there's a great paper on the implicit feudalism of online communities, which talks about how mods and people who are leaders of a particular thing end up unintentionally creating these feudalistic systems without even realizing that that's what they're doing, just in the same kind of way that a lot of people don't realize how their brains are changed by algorithmic preferences to give you more of what you're liking. So my purpose here is in trying to make us aware of these broader influences and themes and things that many people might not have explicitly talked about, much less presented a framework for. And the idea is that I'm basically trying to be a not broken for information ecology, right? So to pierce the veil behind the broken information ecology and take a look at things that are really important. There are um, the War on Sense Making series, but with Daniel Schmachtenberger, is an excellent view into the different ways in which our information ecology is broken. And um, I know I'm telling you guys a lot of bad news right now, but I'm basically just trying to talk about what is the problem we're facing, and we'll get into solutions in this second half here. So there are a couple of other terms that are useful to know in terms of colonization. Coloniality basically is the perpetuation um, of colonized systems. So when you're talking about colonization, what you're really talking about is the construction of these kinds of systems, and as opposed to their perpetuation. And so when we're involved in DAOs where we get to actually participate as a community, and we get to vote on things, and we actually get to carry the perspective, hopefully, that I'm providing you today about what the difference between the architecture of that system. So if you guys are building a whole DAO, you're building a methodology for you know managing money and moving it around. It's good that you actually stop for a moment and think, geez, I'm in the middle of a situation that could, if I'm not doing this with some mindfulness and awareness, and by consulting people who might be able to you know make me understand what's going on, I might actually be subconsciously colonizing something that I didn't realize. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a whole group of lawyers who volunteer and have formed organizations around trying to undo really old law, like laws that have been on the books sometimes for hundreds of years, right? That just don't serve our culture anymore, and yet they're still enforced and enshrined in law. So unwinding a lot of these really old things, we can all do that now by just applying some more mindfulness and taking a look at putting in ways of addressing conflict and addressing ourselves and creating a kind of humble um, what we want to say, like you're doing something on behalf of, not necessarily like a servant, but more like what's the term I'm looking for? Um, more like, yeah, more like a steward of the future generations that are going to use things on Optimism, for example. So there's a certain responsibility to that. And so, yeah, so then hierarchy is a term from feminist literature that is very much the same idea about what coloniality is. So I wanted you guys to have these three terms. So there's colonization, which is the construction of these asymmetric one-way extraction systems, coloniality, which is their perpetuation, and then hierarchy, which is the kind of social inertia talked about often in feminist contexts that perpetuates these kinds of intersectional oppressions. And it is also just, to backtrack a minute back to the the assertion that I'm making here, that colonization is a worldwide financial and governance level expression of narcissistic abuse. That is also based in a kind of anyway, I don't want to go backwards. So let's just continue. So yeah, so they're basically in this instance we're using yoga, but you can actually see in yoga there's this kind of Orientalism, um, but yeah, it's basically there's this oppression, then outside of oppression is colonization or the construction of these unequal systems. You can substitute Orientalism for um, any other any other setup, right? So for example, in cryptocurrency, you know, you can actually see um, some of these things at play already, like with the Sam Bankman-Fried thing. Well, now everyone, thinks about crypto as this giant scam because of the huge, corrupting influence of that kind of person. And so the work that I'm doing here is hopefully a way to redress some of the imbalances created by that. So you could substitute this Orientalism for almost any other aspect of the way that the narcissistic abuse structures are set up, and then understand that oppression, colonization, and whatever we're specifically talking about in cultural appropriation all take place in under any number of different pretexts, right? Um, and they're almost always arbitrary. So I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a trans person, I'm a whatever surface level arbitrary identifiable characteristic, that's the thing that it will be used for a pretext. But the structure of the way that the abusive systems are made is all identical. They're just a number of one nesting doll inside of another. And so if you can string those all together, you can kind of understand that oftentimes what you're going to do when you show up in a DAO or start creating a tool or participate in a community, that you're going to actually bring these patterns with you. And so it's my express purpose to talk about, and surface that as a reality, so that hopefully the community will get together and use groups like ours to ritualize conflict in such a way that they can better understand themselves. And by the way, we have seen this actually at work, where people who didn't bother creating trust or putting in systems that would deal with the creation of a commons or dealing with those principles inevitably end up in conflict. And we've actually seen massive losses in terms of value of coins and things, because one person just dropped a bomb in the middle of what was otherwise a big success. So, um, so yeah, the whole concept here is to kind of understand how all these things work, so that you can make choices that will recenter the epistemologies and the voices of the colonized, um, and be willing to deal with the trauma of people who have been collateral damage in the process. Um, Undoing the extraction and exclusion. So, um, narcissistic abuse has another feature, which is it's all entirely one way. So you're basically asked to give, right? And there are no take backs. And you can see just from income inequality in the last 3 years that this is one of um, the things that had previously been sort of hidden. Now they're just not hiding that anymore, right? Um, so the irony of my subtitle here is that none of these there is no such thing as a post-truth, post-race, post-colonization culture left anymore. And so, but the idea is that uh, yeah, this you can see this from the legacy of, for example, the Habsburgs in Europe and so on. Um, then basically took all of that and moved it out into the rest of the world. And so, yeah, so this is actually taken from a thing called Flick, which is techniques of science denial, but there are all these things that we see actually happening in our media right now. We have to watch out for those things, from prevent those things from happening in our own communities. And so yeah, it basically ends up leading to cults and other things. I do want to now turn the corner on this though, and say that we all have the right to self-knowledge, and these exclusionary one-way extractive systems often make it seem like we actually don't have that right. So it's and the confusion and the emotional turmoil that you're in as a result of these you know extractive and asymmetric systems actually don't allow us to even give ourselves permission to know ourselves. And so the pedagogy of freedom must be known, and we must actually learn how it works, right? And so some of you, when I'm talking to you today, you're going to be in that very first thing, like, hey, I need to wake up to the fact that all of these things exist, and then try to set about trying to figure out what we're going to do about all of these things. And then the then becoming willing to address the traumas that you've suffered, and then to do the hard work that is involved in the step two thing that I showed you guys earlier, where figure out how to decentralize power and so on. Then it takes a certain level of maturity to become willing to do those things, and to move from being a victim to being a player, from knowing that things are going on to then learning about what's going on, and then to advocate for the cleanup process, which is to say, um, geez, we need to, as a community and individually, figure out ways to support each other in authentic communication, constructive negotiation, and really good coordination. These are all things now that you can actually see, um, that's right at the middle here, and this is all taken from Ken Wilber's integral work, by the way. This is kind of where the gravity DAO starts to come into play. So what we're attempting to do basically is saying, there are these things that we need to wake up to. There are these things that we need to mature into, but we're here in terms of helping, to um, help with skills and behavior and trauma informed ideas about how this all works, and to contextualize it all. And then, once you then become willing to clean up, then there's a kind of a transparency which has to come about, right? So in a lot of DAOs, the token engineering commons, we put all our all our meetings up on YouTube. It was very transparent. There's just a kind of radical transparency, in fact, that is the result that you couldn't actually do all of these things unless you had woken up and matured and determined that you were going to clean up. At the moment you become really transparent, um, and don't need to know or control outcomes, then you can kind of move into this transformational presencing. And you can drop the mask. So I tell everybody now when I meet them that I have autism, and that they're talking to an autistic person, and that I think in pages and paragraphs versus words and sentences. So it might seem like I'm monologuing when in fact I'm not. And so it's just based on the way that I experience the world, which is very broad, you know. And so I have learned that I need to open up and hopefully transform my social life by being transparent in this way, and then showing up, which is what you guys are all doing now. So you're all here, right? And you're all showing up and contributing to the DAO that you're participating in, right? The question that I have for all of you is, I'd like you guys to really think about where you guys are in this thing. Because we've decided to show up doesn't always mean that we're completely woken up to everything, but we might be woken up to the idea or the possibility that it could be different, right? And so hopefully you have seen some stuff in here that will um, you know uh, make it so that you'll think think twice about what it is that you're doing, and learn how to ritualize conflict using things like nonviolent communication and liberating structures. And we have a bunch of resources and um, lessons and courses and coaching from me and Bianca and Juan and Jeremy with the liberating structures, and many other people. Um, all kinds of communities involved with complexity and other stuff that we can bring to bear to help you guys individually and as a community. And we're doing all this basically with this idea that it's it's like in the Matrix, we can only show you the door, right? So if you're gonna teach people or communities or help in some kind of reasonable way, there has to be this balance between just doing all the stuff that I've just told you, or in this kind of literal following sort of a way, or are we empowering you to actually learn about yourself and go into the threshold of your own mind. So yeah, so I further detail in some slides that I don't have time left to. I'd like to use the last 10 minutes to wrap up on, but yeah, I go into more about what does it actually take to wake up, to have self-acceptance and self-compassion and self-regulation, self-expression, self-awareness, and some of the tools that we use. You know, you can compare and contrast them with the tools of abusers, right? And um, so yeah, I'll provide a lot of these things for you guys to kind of look over, and there's tons and tons of links as well on how to go through all of this, and I'll let you guys do that as sort of homework for yourself. Yeah, and there's all kinds of things too. Basically, what I'm uh, giving you guys permission to and asking you guys explicitly to do is to assert your own right to become conscious of all this and learn and grow and become better and ask for help, and that's what we're uh, as Gravity is kind of here for. So if you've got questions, we'll be happy to answer them. And I think if it's supposed to be an hour, it's fine. I don't mind staying a little bit after. So why don't I turn the presentation off? I will turn the camera back on, and I will ask you guys to please give me your feedback and/or give us some questions so that um, hopefully we can uh, give you some relevant answers.
Please, whoever wants to speak, first of all, thank you, Durgadas. It was an amazing presentation. Whoever wants to speak, please raise your hand, and I'll make just a comment from some of the notes that I took on the presentation. And it's that still the branding that we see from DAOs is very utopic. We see
Yes.
rainbows and unicorns, and
Yes. Right.
sometimes it's also, as Durga said, like skipping to step three because somehow step two is is deliberate and has to be intentional. And we are like, okay, we come from this extractive system. Now we have a DAO. Okay, everything is working, and we are not intentionally looking at what has to be deconstructed and changed from the legacy systems. Also, that this is the third lesson of a series of trainings. We will have sessions all weeks until mid-September, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can also follow this course with our online training that I shared in the side chat. And another thing is that we'll be distributing a pop-up for your presence today. So I am going to be sharing a QR code that you are supposed to um, scan with your phone. And with this brief introduction, I would really like to hear, and I know Durga does too, some of the people in the space and
Yes, please.
what's alive to you right now.
I know that this is supposed to finish in 6 minutes, but I'm willing to stay here for like half an hour or whatever longer. So please do come up with your questions.
If you don't want to speak, you can also write your questions in the chat. Um,
Yes, please do that.
for another contextualization, this is a proposal that was supported by the Optimism Foundation on an RFP to try to um, support the development of solutions towards the implementation and enforcement of the code of conduct. So we are creating awareness around many topics that we think that are relevant towards conflict management in DAOs from a very wide perspective. And as Durgadas mentioned very briefly, some of the other topics that we're going to cover in next weeks, we're going to talk also about nonviolent communication. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to give you negotiation strategies and how to look for agreements. So yeah, the idea with this is that you are more prepared to deal with conflict in your life daily, and also in the to mediate and facilitate in the conflict that may appear in the DAO, because the need of solving conflict is very similar to the need of eating. It's something that we may solve episodes, but conflict is a cycle, and it's how life also allows us to learn, to assess things, to change, to transform. So yes, as um, I said in some of my previous sessions, conflict itself is not bad. It has a transformative energy that we have to be able to look and process through the noise. And yeah, I really hope you have enjoyed this. I will um, invite once again at least someone from the audience to be brave and to share what's alive in them
Yep,
after
please
this
do. You don't
whole
have
thing.
to say it on audio. Please just write it or something. Um, yeah, what's alive in you is one of the principles of nonviolent communication. It's also interesting because my guru gave me this definition of life. He said, life is about adapting, adjusting, and accommodating. And to do that, you have to inevitably sort of volunteer to place yourself in a potentially conflictual situation in order to grow. And so there's a kind of intentionality to that. In yoga, it's actually called tapasya. So you're intentionally volunteering for the difficulty that you're seeking to address in order to have the struggle and then hopefully come out with a better, competence and outcome. from all of it. So yeah, okay. So again, I'll just hang out here while you guys are thinking about what you'd like to ask, or is there some place you generally write things out that I could look for questions, maybe in the general chat? Let's see here.
I
I don't.
think the side chat would be the
Okay.
place to put some questions.
Hmm.
But if we are not going to receive questions, even
Yeah.
when we would like to, either
Yep.
way, thank you all for coming, for taking your time to learn with us, to um, learn about conflict. It may be conflictive for you to address these topics, but we want you to welcome those uncomfortable feelings, because that's also the process of waking up to topics that sometimes we overlook. And yeah, thank you especially to Durgadas for leading this amazing presentation. I always learn a lot from you, and I really can highlight how you express your ideas with a lot of clarity and simplicity, even though that they are very deep. So yeah, once again, thank you everyone. Once that you claim 5 of these POAPs that we'll be distributing, you will receive a special POAP that certifies you from taking this course and being able to support in conflict management in DAOs.
Yeah, and
So
we need you guys, to participate. It's the we often, the metaphor I use in terms of like software development or in people who are developing tools in the crypto space is we spend a lot of time learning like languages, So we've got languages for crypto, we've got C++, we've got Java, we've got Python, we've got all these different languages. We spend all this different time learning, but why is it that we're reluctant to learn about shared languages between ourselves interpersonally? And that's what I'm inviting you guys to think about for a second, is actually just how important it is, and just how actually part of that sort of abusive structure that we're all trying to escape from has made us believe that it's actually, the only way to go is actually to kind of ignore the possibility that we could resolve things or develop competence in the resolution of conflicts, and therefore deepen our relationships and our friendships in such a way that eventually results in the prospering of us both individually, but also as a community with a broader idea than what we might see expressed in popular culture now. So I that's my pitch for you guys trying to you know come into this side of really looking forward to engaging in this kind of creation of shared language. So we've seen it, the more successful groups actually, that we've been dealing with definitely address this. And there's no place in which you're going to find no conflict at all. But the whole point is to transform it into trust creation and to learn lessons from it. So thank you guys very much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
thanks everyone. Bye. Hope you
Thank you.
liked it.